Easter, the triumphal joy, doesn't come without the death and desolation of Good Friday. But that isn't a yin and yang philosophy of which every bad comes good. Not every bad is overcome by good, which is quite often a Christian philosophy. Sometimes bad happens, it simply does, and it isn't resurrected. We are left with emptiness and loneliness. But that also doesn't mean that resurrection was a simple one-off event confined to a single moment in history. By no means. The stories of the Bible after the resurrection give us a good pointer and understanding that life does continue. Our roles as disciples continue despite the obvious weakness and failure of the cross. Weakness and failure by human standards. Christians nowadays have sanitised our faith beyond recognition because from the 19th century we have been on the quest for the answer, the definitive. And we have almost turned the cross so much on its head that the triumphalism of the cross is now treated with as much victory as society deems its failure. The cross, of course, is a victory of life over death and ultimate, but actually that cross needs to be lived out every day, where the darkness of lives isn't met by the light of hope, where there is massive separation between rich and poor, where society teaches self, where we are encouraged to be that which we are not through the media in its many forms. The resurrection of Jesus happened, and then there are the stories afterward. The empty tomb, recognising that God is in the space between that which we know for certain. The recognising of Christ in the gardener, seeing Christ in each other. In the breaking of the bread of friendship, Christ was recognised. In the fish breakfast and the abundance of life that there is for the taking if we saw the Christ in each other. And recognising it in ourselves, where God is. God in us, with the many gifts that we have. And the issue then is what we sanitise God once more. Nina Simone began life singing in church, and her mother was definite that her God-given gifts should be used to the glory of God. That is, she should use only her voice and her musical talent to sing gospel for the Lord. When, therefore, she began to sing popular music and also write it, her mother saw it as the devil's work. And yet Nina Simone was instrumental in inspiring and supporting the Black liberation movement in America through her songs. In fact, when the Black Panther movement groups were invaded, the police confiscated all of Simone's records. She was a one-voice propaganda machine without making it explicit, and her passion, equality, began whence she was a little girl, at a concert in the town in which she lived. Because her parents weren't white, they weren't allowed to sit at the front, even though Nina Simone was the only artist. This had a profound effect, especially the reaction of her parents who didn't want the fuss and accepted their station in life. God's gift of her voice and her musical talent was put to good use, but just not simply in the way that Simone's mother imagined. Because as always, we sanitize our faith and worship it into piety and what we perceive to be what the church wants. History has taught us that we simply can't confuse the work of God with the church. In fact, most often the work of God has continued despite the church. And that is what the resurrection is all about, recognizing God outside of church, outside of worship, outside of gentle society. We are called to see God in the broken as Christ was broken on the cross, to see God in the despised as Jesus was despised and heckled, to see God in the rejected, in the suffering. If we see God in the God-forsaken places and people, then we see the true resurrected Christ. To recognise God, we need to recognise that which we find unpleasant. It isn't about the victory at the end, it's about recognising the race in itself. For when we recognise the race we are on, we have already received the victory.